So Steve, first of all, can you introduce yourself for the audience?
Yep. I'm Steve Fudge. I've been coaching sprints since 2010. Um, yeah. Um, I studied sports science at the University of Edinburgh, and then after that, I kind of did a couple of work experience placements across the world. One was in Seattle at the University of Washington as an S&C coach. I then did one in the Australian Institute of Sport in South Australia. Um, as an S&C coach, and then came back to the UK. We were lucky enough to have the 2012 Olympics, and as part of that, they were doing um, practitioner development programs, and I ended up as an S&C coach in one of those programs. So I learned how to be an S&C coach at the Welsh Institute of Sport, um, and then it was then I first connected with athletics and track and field, and connected with some athletes and did S&C programs for track and field athletes and worked for the Welsh Athletics um, program. And from there, then sort of moved into full time track coaching. I was lucky enough to meet Dan Paff and Kevin Tyler and Derek Evely and all those guys when they were in the UK. And they had this apprentice coach scheme set up. So I was very, very lucky to sort of go into that. And my first sort of go at building a training group was in Loughborough under their sort of guidance, I guess. And so we set up a training group in Loughborough and got that going. Um, Turned out to be a pretty good training group. We had um, some really good performances there. James Daffodil ran 991. Adam Jubilee ran 997 and 1997. We had Asha Phillip came up and joined from London, and she was able to run 11:10 and 7:06 indoors, and that was our kind of first training group. And I did that until the Rio Olympics, basically. And then after that, I sort of decided to move to London, and I currently have my own business down here in London. And we've continued to be quite successful. We've had a number of people in that group go sub 10. We had Eugene Amodazi go sub 10 this year in 993. And we've had various other athletes do extremely well. 10:03 for Ade Ogunele this year. Oji Edeboro went 10:04. So, yeah, we're getting it done down here in London. So I kind of have my own business. I do mostly sprints coaching for full time athletes. I do coach mentoring to people around the world. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Nice, nice. So first, the first question would be what's the difference between being a strength coach and being a sprint coach?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think my first sort of work as a strength conditioning coach really taught me all the basics that you need for coaching, like programming, understanding the body, um, preventing injuries, good mechanics, all that sort of stuff. So strength coaching is a really good way of just learning how to interact in the elite performance field, how you can make a difference, how you can program, how you can work with coaches, how you can interact with athletes, all those sort of things. So that was really important part of my sort of development, was just getting those basics in place. I think the major difference is, as a strength coach, you're really responsible for one piece of the jigsaw puzzle, and as a lead coach, you're kind of responsible for the whole jigsaw puzzle, if that makes sense. So yeah, as a strength coach, you become really interested in a very, very small area, and you put a lot of detail into that. But as a coach of a sprint program, you kind of got to, less detail into all areas, but understand all areas, and get them all to work together. So,
Nice, nice, nice. So, the next thing I want to go to the sprinting detail. So I noticed that you utilize rolling start or falling start, but tradition we kind of use like push and like kind of emphasize on triple extension. So can you explain a little like why you use like rolling start and falling start?
Like I start from a standing position, yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
Um, that's kind of I use it just right at the start of the general preparation block, mainly because it's a really soft way to start to teach some acceleration patterns. Um, if you're really honest about it, there isn't a lot of transfer over to the actual event with the stand and start, but it's a really nice way to teach people the sort of basics of how to, exit from zero, learn how to tip their weight over their toes, learn how to roll their shin, um, learn how to do all those sort of things in a very sort of safe space, but it's basically level one. And then once they've, spent a couple of weeks there and mastered that, then we move them very quickly onto harder start positions like a kneel and start, for example. And then from a kneel and start into things like 3 points and 4 points. And then we use the one pedal and then the two pedal, and then we bring them into competitive starts. And all that progression, all that's doing is that you're basically manage the intensity of the start that you're using. You're going from something that's very easy and manageable to something that, the next stage up is slightly harder and they've got less time to organize themselves and it's a slightly harder challenge. And then once they've mastered that, you move on to the next thing. So yeah, that kind of takes us about 10 to 12 weeks to move through all those steps. But yeah, we use the stand and start as our entry point more than anything else.
Cool. So would you like, let's say during the season, would you go back to like the standing start?
No, not really. it's it's something that we use to right at the start of the general preparation block to get some reps in, to get some volumes in, to get some key skills learned. But once they've mastered that, there's no real reason for us to kind of go back to it. As a teaching tool, it's kind of done its job, and we kind of move on to the harder things that are kind of more relevant to their events. But yeah, it's useful right in the beginning for sure.
Gotcha, gotcha. So the other thing I saw is like you utilize a lot of like cone drills for like acceleration. So can you like or like can you give us some thought about how would you place those cones? Is it like acceleration ladder it is?
We use so we use the Vincent Anderson charts, which are great, and I've used them since 2015 maybe. 2016 I started to use that into my coaching. It's very important to realize that they're just a tool to use in your general preparation. You're teaching people general. It's a general preparation exercise to teach some fundamentals to do with acceleration, to do with acceleration rhythm, to do with upright transition rhythm. And it's very important not to confuse it with the actual specific event, because lots of people use acceleration ladders and cones and then they think, yeah, we're doing sprint training at, very specific levels. But, I use it as a part of the teaching progression, as part of a sort of part of our technical development. But when we get to the specific preparation part, I'm very, very aware that you need to actually sprint as well without the cones, without the ladders. But yeah, essentially in our general preparation, we use two things. We use the acceleration ladder, which is the way I do it is I stick cones out to about 25 meters. I get them to work on their acceleration rhythm. I choose a setting which is kind of just going to be right for that athlete. And what you often see and what you're going to see is once they accelerate, and is very likely that as they move down through the acceleration ladder is that they won't be able to make the steps, because most athletes will go too frequent too soon. So we just use that to use the ladder just to sort of try and build this sort of idea that you want to keep your acceleration rhythm in a way which isn't dominated by going too frequent too early and changing your shape too early. So yeah, we use that acceleration ladder early on in our general preparation to set some fundamentals about accelerating with rhythm and with patience and not changing your posture too quickly and not going frequent too early. So we use that acceleration ladder. The other thing we do is we use the cones. I use the cones to so yeah, the acceleration ladder would be, just so everybody's aware, the acceleration ladder is you're going from zero and you, let's say you've got 13 steps marked out at appropriate spaces. That's the acceleration ladder. I use the transition cones in a different way, which is, the cones are set out from 10 meters, so they have a 10-meter run in, and that's more to do with learning how to transition, from the end of the acceleration into your upright running. And we kind of start that in the winter, out to like 35 meters, then we take it to 40, then take it to 45 meters. Again, we start people out on that process of just learning how to maintain their rhythm, not go too frequent, and just by having the transition codes there, the athlete kind of learns that stride length, what stride length is, how it's important, how to maintain it, how to be progressive with your postures to maintain, to make sure that you're able to sort of get over the cones. So it's a really good fundamental general preparation drill.
Cool. So you mentioned a lot of times like rhythm. So that leads me to the next question. Like, some of the player they're probably gonna so some of the athlete they're probably gonna like push too much, so they don't have enough time to recover. So, uh, they won't be able to like switch the tie, switch the knee fast enough, and some of them are probably like switch too fast. They don't really push that much. So how to balance this between pushing and switching?
Well, look, I think fundamentally what you're going to see is you're going to get a lot of athletes onto these drills and they're not going to use their hips appropriately, right? So, you know, they're 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 going to, my big thing is not really about switching and not moving the pushing the thigh. I don't like to like really target and break it down into those specific details. I kind of just like to get athletes to move appropriately from their big muscle groups, from their hips. And 9 times out of 10, if you cue them and you get them to understand that, and you ask them not to change their posture too quickly, they'll be able to stay, in a place where they are striking in the right sort of in front of themselves, and they're not pushing too far behind, and all those sort of things. But it does take you standing on beside the track to point these things out to them to make sure that they don't fall into those areas of like trying to push too much or getting things behind themselves too much. I think I like to look at things globally. I like them to move from their hips. I also like them to understand that part of getting a successful ground contact is moving down the racetrack with, shoulders, hips, everything's moving at the same time. And how assertive they have to be with their postures to keep that process going down the racetrack. And if they're not assertive, they'll lose it pretty quickly. So it's all about being assertive with your postures. Understand that we want things to be moving from the hips all the way through the execution of their 100-meter race, for example. And they've got to be really sort of ahead of the game. Um, with that, they can't ever come off it in terms of allowing themselves to push too far out the back, and then all of a sudden their hips are like not with their shoulders and all the rest of it. So it's about teaching global movements for me rather than saying switch your thigh quicker or anything like that. So that's kind of where I spend my time. And then yeah, it's just really hard. It's standing on the side of the track day in day out, just slightly, and reminding them of these things, and it takes time to develop these things. It's across a preparation block. It's a lot of hard work, 12 weeks. For example, if that's your general prep of just standing reminding them of these things. And every time you move them from their training flats into their spikes or from a harder acceleration position, you will see them start to change and want to take smaller steps, want to cycle quicker, want to rush through that process. And it's been with them every single day to go right. Look, just take your time, use your hips, don't bring your shoulders back here, don't snatch at the run here. All those sort of things that we kind of do day to day. Yeah, and that's just teaching movement. A lot of sprinting is about them sort of being confident enough and assertive enough to do this under the pressure of I want to run quick, or I'm not quite strong enough to let my shin roll and to move my hip and all those sort of things. So I'm just going to snatch at it instead. And it's been with them every single day to make sure, look, yeah, you stay on this, you trust in it, you keep your rhythm, you keep your timings, you don't rush your shoulders back, you stay on it. And that's where the acceleration ladders and the cones are just a useful external point of reference to go, do you know what? You're not sticking up with the acceleration ladder here, or you're not quite making the steps in your cone run here. So therefore, this is how we fix it.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Nice, man. So, I know you probably answered this, and just to like clarify, or just to give those like audience who didn't like who have didn't have that much of an experience with like speed or like track and field,
Yep.
can you like explain a little? Is it kind of the same with stride length and stride frequency? If you focus on projecting the hip, pushing the hip, and like placing the foot at the right placement, it will automatically come.
Yeah. I mean, um, the biggest thing that sometimes a real challenge is just to explain to your athletes what stride length actually is. There's a big misunderstanding in that stride length means having like a big space between your legs, but what stride length actually is the point of departure where you leave the ground to where you then return to the ground, the space that you've covered in the air. That's what stride length is. So it's that's really one sort of thing, is to get that understanding out to the athletes so that they kind of then go, right, okay, and stride length's actually all about hitting the ground hard and then organizing my posture to allow me to travel through the air to cover ground. And once they kind of understand that, you can teach that. And then yeah, the frequency side of it is, yeah, like you said, it's they kind of understand what frequency is, and most people do, but it's then sort of making sure that you want two of those things to be natural for the athlete. You don't want to artificially engineer them taking big massive steps with a very low frequency, because that's not going to work. And then you don't want to go the other way where they're too frequent without sort of hitting the ground. And then how you arrive at the optimum is, yeah, you educate and you teach of where to hit the ground, how to organize your posture for that ground strike, how to enable and make sure that you get a good ground contact in the right place, and then your posture needs to move assertively to prepare for the next one, and how you assemble yourself down a 100-meter race, which which is quite a long way to maintain posture and maintain discipline and make sure that you aren't rushing things. Because in the 100-meter race, in our event, once you kind of panic a little bit, or you go a little bit short, or you bring your shoulders back too far, you then start to not be able to demonstrate those things that, especially the stride length side of it, because you'll be projecting up and down, and you won't really be able to project yourself forward once you kind of make a couple of basic errors right at the start. So yeah, it's about maintaining your posture, maintaining your discipline, to ensure that you're able to project forward, that you don't go up and then you don't fall into trying to rescue everything with having massive stride frequency. So yeah, that's essentially what we try and do.
Nice. I love it. I love it. So, um, the other thing is like when we teach our athlete that mm, if we gave them certain cue, like I want to like increase the stride length, they're probably gonna cast out. So is there like certain cue to like help you at like when they hit max velocity, they're gonna have like longer stride length, but the foot placement is okay. The foot placement is good, and they're not gonna strike out.
Yeah, look, I've been coaching for a long time, and you just don't want to overcoach this stuff too much. Like a big part of getting people's stride length to improve isn't actually, standing on the side of the track and asking them to hit the ground harder and try and have bigger steps. That's something which is just going to get the athlete. Okay, I need to take bigger steps, and then you'll see a lot of over pushing and a lot of over striding. How you improve stride length is it's a very like um it's a massive ecosystem. It's the person needs to be getting stronger in the gym sensibly and learning how to move appropriately from their hips in the gym, how to be strong enough in their trunk and their shoulders and all the rest of it to be able to maintain really strong postures. That the athlete needs to be getting really good therapy to be able to support the changes that you want to see. Um, so yeah, it's what like the tip of the iceberg or the top of the mountain is standing beside the side of the track and asking them to to have a bigger stride length. But if you're not taking care of all the things that kind of feed into that, then you've got no chance, right? And then you will see the overstriding, the casting out, all those sort of things, and that's just the athlete trying to artificially, you know, do it rather than being able to do it because of their physical conditioning and everything that you're doing is allowing them to learn how to use their hips appropriately. So when the foot impacts the ground, they've got this situation where their hip is able to move from behind their foot to the top of their foot to in front of their foot. And they're able to use their hip to produce force in that moment. So, yeah, I think we, as speed coaches, we like to stand and cue our athletes and explain things to them, but we also have to be doing all the other work to ensure that when we're asking them to do things, they're able to do it. They've got the physical tools to do it. Otherwise, you're going to end up with lots of artificial movements, which won't really work.
Nice, nice, nice. So the other thing you mentioned a lot is like posture. So uh can you give us some clue about like when it's in acceleration, what's the posture gonna be looking like, and when we hit max velocity, what's the posture gonna be looking like?
Yeah, I think it's most acceleration instances are people leaving zero and automatically losing their posture immediately because they can't cope with leaving the start line. So you see lots of people not taking the time to actually let the shin move, and then project their hip and then get their shoulders and their trunk assertively out in front of themselves. You don't often see people being brave enough and to be patient enough to allow that to happen. Um, you know, and then what generally happens is people don't exit zero with enough assertiveness and bravery and patience, and then they're automatically their feet are catching themselves over steps one, two, three, and then what generally happens with inexperienced people who don't do these things and don't take the time is they use steps one, two, and three to sort of catch themselves and then reorganize themselves, and then they have another go at acceleration. Um, but that's from a position of them reacting, trying to recover their control, trying to recover balance, and then going again. By then, the race is pretty much done at the top level if you're going through that. So a lot of the assertiveness, a lot of the postures and acceleration are about being assertive with your upper body, getting your chest, getting your shoulders down the racetrack. But then it's also about there's this paradox of being assertive with your upper body, getting out in front of yourself, but then taking your time with your shin to roll and for your hip to project. So you've got this sort of like paradox of one part of your body needs to be very assertive, and then the other part needs to be very like patient and take time. So acceleration is a real tricky one because you got lots of people who kind of just want to rush. We want to just find a way of getting balanced in a very unbalanced situation, which is what acceleration is. You mean you're basically trying to deal with the fact that you're going to fall over, and your job as an athlete isn't, at the sort of top level, is to basically learn to go with that in a way which doesn't have you stopping and starting. So yeah, that's acceleration. For me, upright run it's very similar. It's like you've got a situation where if you've done everything correctly, you're going to come into the middle part of the 100-meter race with a ton of momentum, and your job is to essentially not allow yourself to give into this sort of idea that it's okay to stand. I could just stand up and run. It's about you know dealing with that momentum, dealing with that speed, placing your shoulders. I always like to say your shoulders just need to be slightly ahead. You can't allow your shoulders to come back because once you do that, you're into a very up down motion instead of a very like back to front. So everything's about maintaining this ability to project forward. So when you do get into upright running, your shoulders have to be slightly ahead. Every time your foot hits the ground, your hip has got to get from the behind position to the on top position to the front position. And again, there's this sort of thing where you need to take time to allow that process to happen. Um, so you have this very assertive, very dynamic rib cage shoulder position. But then you have this situation with your hips and your feet where, yeah, they do need to be colliding with the ground. They do need to be absorbing the ground contact, and they do need to be taking time to get some level of hip involvement to push yourself forward through the air. So, yeah, the upright posture is, again, it's kind of paradoxical that you are moving at a really fast speed, but parts of that process need to be done very patiently.
Nice, nice. So, uh, I know like some of the coaches, including me, when we teach speed, we probably tend to like talk too much, and sometimes like put athlete in a position that they don't really know how to perform. So, what are your
Yeah.
thoughts on like talking too much? And
Well, we all, I mean, every sprints coach in the world will go through general preparation to specific preparation to race time. Um, you've essentially got to get all your teaching and talking done in that general preparation part. You that's your time to educate. That's your time to use cues. That's your time to increase understanding. And then you've kind of you got to taper your style of coaching appropriately with the type of preparation blocks you're in. So when I move into specific prep, then you're looking at bringing down the sort of amount of talking that you're doing and look to sort of use a lot of external feedback. With your athletes. Lots of people use timing gates. Lots of people use free lap. Lots of people. I just use the stopwatch. And also, things like the Excel ladders and things like the cones are very good at just, they're external things that the athlete, it's not intrinsic to them. It's not an internal sort of thing that they have to understand. It's like you you start to put their ways of feedback into external means, and then they can sort of go, yeah, I did this and it achieved this result. Whether that's a stopwatch, whether that's a free lap, whether that's a cone drill, whether that's meeting the marks on the Excel ladder or whatever. But they start to get this idea of actions result in an external results, which is what the event is. And then as you move through the specific preparation block, you kind of want things to start to get way more automatic and simple in the athlete's head. They can't have, where am I going to hit the ground? Am I going to overstride? Am I going to be over pushing? That's something that cannot be happening around about the end of your specific preparation block. You absolutely need to get all that done in your general prep so that when they're getting ready to race, they're very much taking what they've got and making it very simple in their heads. Because look, no athlete, as you take them through this journey of general prep to specific prep, no athlete's going to be perfect. Um, you might have an idea that you want certain ideas around frequency and step length and all the rest of it, but at a certain point, you're just going to go, we're at where we're at, and we've just got to make this really, really smooth. And the athlete's got to execute it under a lot of pressure, and it's got to be really simple for them.
Nice. So, for coaching all those like sprinters, what do you think um mm, let's say what makes an athlete that they can run sub 10, that between like what makes it like the athlete can go like faster, and what let's say what happened when like, or like what suits the athlete like go run sub 10, and what we do to like kind of like destroy or like kind of like not helping them.
Um, well, I've coached three athletes to run sub 10. And the common things that have come from those three different experiences is number one, you need to have an athlete who's got some level of ability. Like talent. Talent's quite fundamental to that whole process. The second thing you've got to do is you've got to be really consistent. Like normally these guys with that level of ability and talent will have a very sort of lots of injuries, lots of examples of them sort of not quite sort of staying healthy enough to allow their talent to come through. And I think in all those three instances of people I've got to run sub 10 is they've been extremely talented. They've had a lot of history of, injuries and breaks in their training. And I think, you know, forgetting all the details of how we got them to run sub 10, the biggest things is we stopped them getting injured and we stopped them having breaks in their training. So you've got to figure that part of it out. Now that can pretty much be, you look into it and go, right, I've got to get the program inside of this absolutely right. I've got to make sure that the athlete is getting in right amount of tempo or volume in the program, but not too much that it's too much and it's disrupting this sort of ability to do high speed work. They've got to be able to do a consistent amount of high speed work and learn how to do these sort of mechanical things that we've been talking about. They've got to be doing the right type of preparation in the gym. They've got to be getting the right type of therapy. And I think if you can get all those sort of things right, and you keep people of that level of ability and talent healthy and consistent enough over, a preparation block into a competition season, into another preparation block, into another competition season, then you're going to start to see results. And yeah, there's no magic, there's no magic out there in terms of we said this to this person and it made a run sub 10. It's more just, a couple of good preparation blocks, making good decisions, stopping them getting hurt, keeping them consistent, giving them, a couple times a week, they're doing some level of high level sprinting and learning how to practice their event. A couple times a week, they're doing some level of tempo running, which keeping them generally fit. Multiple times a week, they're getting strong in the gym in various different ways, and a couple of times a week that they're getting therapy, which is allowing them to move better and stay healthy, and that then all those sort of things allow them to do this technical practice that you're going to be doing, and that just elevates and gets better. The more you stay consistent with it, the more reps you get, gives you more time for them to understand how to control their postures and understand their movements and stuff, and then it kind of just all comes together. I think of those three different people that I've got to run sub 10, yes, the first one was very much James Dasolu, was very much somebody who had a lot of stride length, who was able to project himself. He was very, very strong. Um, and we built that program very much short to long, from acceleration, um, from very sort of small amounts of quality, and then gradually was able to do a little bit more quality as time went on. I think the second person, Adam Jamili, was probably the opposite. We kind of manufactured a training system that kind of worked for him, which didn't have a lot of acceleration in it. um, which had a lot of sub maximal tempo in it as a foundation. Um, and that was the thing that kind of kept him injury free. And we kind of used the racing space to do a lot more acceleration work and a lot more technical work. And we kind of built him up from a very, you could say, long to short way. And then the third person that we did it with more recently, Eugene Amodadzi, who went 993. We kind of did a sort of a combination of those two things. It wasn't a completely acceleration short to long type program, but it very much wasn't a very long to short, lots of volume to begin with type program. But it was very much sort of stuck in the middle. So, I think getting people to run sub 10 is more about this sort of longer, sort of bigger picture of, yeah, don't get hurt, stay consistent, get some race repetitions in, get some lots of practice running your event and training, and staying healthy enough. And if you do that and they've got enough talent, then they'll go quick.
Nice, nice. So you mentioned like short to long or long to short, different approach with different athlete, right?
Yeah.
So can you explain a little like what is short to long and what is long to short?
Yeah. I mean, every training program is going to have a part of it which is to do with specific running. Like eventually it's going to lead to high speed sprinting, and one way of doing high speed sprinting practice is to start with shorter reps, and then they go out to medium reps, and then they go out to longer reps. So essentially, that's what short to long means. You know, Also by definition, I guess it kind of ties in with the philosophy of building some quality and then adding the quantity on. So you build and establish some level of quality, and then you add in quantity as you go on through that process. Now, obviously, people get confused because, let's say, for example, your high speed running progression is going from short to long. It doesn't mean your whole program is going short to long. You could have your medium, slower paced running going from long to short, or in some cases that can be short as well, but it could also just be medium the whole time. Like you could just be using the same type of tempo ranges and meterage and whatever else, and that doesn't change. So our job as the sprints coach is you've got to establish the progression for your high speed running, and you've got to basically pick a system that kind of works for your high speed running, whether that's lots of accelerations, bringing it out to longer distances, or the opposite of having longer distances and bringing it shorter. But once you establish what your high speed progression is going to be, you then have to decide what your other running, your slower medium type running, or your very slow extensive type running is going to be. And then your job as a sprints coach is to do enough of that other type of running to make sure you don't affect this mainstream, the top stream, because that's the thing that has to set from starting out to week 6 to week 10 to week 15 or whatever, however long your general preparation block. That's the thing that you need to be consistently taken care of to make sure that that's happening, that you're not going to do too much running and too much lifting and too much other stuff, which then affects that, because that's the thing that's golden. That's the thing that's going to really allow them to run fast. And I think lots of people get mixed up in doing too much of the other stuff and not protecting this sort of mainstream. So yeah, essentially, yeah, and if I'm really honest, a lot of the technical mainstream is 9 times out of 10 it's going to be short to long. You are going to start out with shorter distances. You're going to do accelerations, and then you're going to bring them out to a certain distance, and then you're going to do transition drills, and you're going to bring them out to a certain distance, and then eventually you're going to do some longer reps. And so the general feel of it will be short to long. You can get some sort of variation in that if you're still doing a lot of accelerations and you're still doing a lot of foundational work, which is short to long, but then you take your longer specific preparation work, and sometimes you can spin that and come from the longer side, from 150 downwards, for example, that type of thing. That's one thing you can do if it makes sense. But yeah, so the classifications can be a little bit like everything that you. It feels like everything's short to long, but there's that's just a it's just a very generic term to label onto a program that kind of emphasizes a lot of acceleration development and whatever else. But there could be other parts of that training program which are having longer reps, which are including longer work. So yeah, it's just one of those terms that's sort of used, but there's lots of different ways of looking at it and lots of detail around it, I guess.
Nice, nice. So last question before I let you go, okay?
Yes, sir.
So for like all those like experience you have, like all those years as a strength coach, as a sprint coach, what do you think that the most important lesson you learned throughout all these experience?
Yeah, you have to get the program right. The sort of the programming, the amount and type of running that you're doing, you absolutely have to be looking at that constantly to make sure that it's working for the individual, that they're responding to the work that you're giving them. And that your job is to set out a program that kind of makes sense and then sit back and watch and say, look, is this athlete able to do enough high speed sprinting practice to improve their movements, to stay healthy, to keep getting faster, to absorb the changes in um, the changes in speed that are going to happen throughout the preparation block. Can they handle that with the type of programming I'm putting together? And I think the biggest thing I've learned is to really dial down onto into the individual in front of you. How are they responding? Are they staying healthy? Are they moving appropriately? Do they look like they can absorb and respond to the training type of training that you're giving them? I think that's the biggest thing you've got to get right.
Nice, nice. That's all I have for you today. So for those who are interested in what we are talking about today, where can they reach out to you?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, Fudge London Project on Instagram. Um, you can reach me on there. That's the best way. Direct message me, or and yeah, we're always looking for um, elite level athletes to join our training group in London, and we're always looking for coach any aspiring coaches around the world. We want to sort of connect and have conversations. We're always looking for that as well. So yeah, you can direct message me on there.
Nice, thanks.
All right.